Welcome to Story Planet, where every tale is a journey through warmth and wonder. Tonight, let us take you to the quiet, cobblestone streets of Bellhurst, where the rain gently falls and the air is filled with the comforting scent of fresh bread. Imagine stepping inside a cozy, candlelit bakery where the fire crackles and the smell of warm pastries wraps around you like a blanket. As you settle in, let the story of the baker's night in Bellhurst unfold, inviting you to relax, unwind, and enjoy the peaceful atmosphere. The journey begins now. Let's step inside together. The baker's night in Bellhurst. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, a soft, rhythmic patter that filled the cobblestone streets of Bellhurst with a quiet melody. The small medieval town, nestled in the hills of northern France, was known for its charming stone buildings, narrow alleyways, and the scent of fresh bread that wafted through the air. Tonight, however, the streets were empty, save for the occasional flicker of candlelight through rain-streaked windows. In the heart of Bellhurst stood a modest bakery, its wooden sign swaying slightly in the wind. The sign read, "Le pain de l'aube," the bread of dawn, but there was no need for words. Everyone in Bellhurst knew this was Lucien's bakery. A man of few words, but great kindness, whose bread was as much a part of the town as the ancient clock tower that chimed every hour. Inside the bakery, the air was warm and fragrant, filled with the comforting scent of rising dough, cinnamon, and vanilla. A fire crackled in the small hearth, casting a golden glow across the wooden counters and shelves lined with freshly baked pastries. Lucien stood behind the counter, kneading dough with practiced hands, his white apron dusted with flour. It was a quiet night, the kind Lucien had grown used to over the years. Bellhurst was a peaceful town, and most of its inhabitants were tucked away in their homes, enjoying warm meals in the company of family. But Lucien didn't mind the solitude. There was something soothing about the rhythm of his work, the way his hands moved automatically, the gentle rise and fall of the bread as it baked. Outside, the rain continued to fall, heavier now, its steady drumming broken only by the occasional gust of wind that sent leaves skittering across the streets. Lucien glanced at the clock above the door. It was nearing closing time, and he was just about to lock up for the night when he heard the jingle of the bell above the door. A figure stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, water dripping from their coat and pooling on the floor. Lucien raised an eyebrow, surprised to see anyone out on a night like this. The figure, a young traveler, looked up, her face illuminated by the warm light of the bakery. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her eyes were wide with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "I'm sorry to bother you," the traveler said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't realize the storm would be this bad, and I seem to have lost my way." Lucien nodded and motioned for her to step inside, offering a silent invitation. The traveler hesitated for a moment before crossing the threshold, the door closing with a soft thud behind her. She stood awkwardly by the counter, water still dripping from her coat and boots. Lucien disappeared into the back room for a moment and returned with a thick woolen blanket. He handed it to the traveler without a word, and she took it gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders as she moved closer to the warmth of the fire. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucian nodded again and returned to his work, the silence between them comfortable, almost companionable. For a while, the only sounds were the crackling of the fire, the soft thud of dough being kneaded, and the steady rhythm of the rain against the windows. The traveler watched Lucien work, her eyes tracing the way his hands moved with practiced precision, shaping the dough into perfect rounds before placing them on the baking tray. There was something almost hypnotic about it, the simple, repetitive motion, the quiet dedication to his craft. "I didn't expect to find a bakery open this late," she said after a while, her voice breaking the silence. Lucian glanced up, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I bake for the early risers," he said simply. His voice was deep and steady, with the faintest hint of a French accent. The traveler smiled. "You must love what you do." Lucian shrugged, but there was a warmth in his eyes that suggested she was right. "It's a quiet life, but a good one." For a while, they spoke in soft tones, their conversation as gentle as the rain outside. The traveler introduced herself as Amelia, a writer from Paris who had come to the countryside in search of inspiration for her next novel. She had planned to stay in a nearby village, but had lost her way in the storm, and Bellhurst had been the first place she found. Lucian listened quietly, nodding occasionally as he worked, his movements never faltering. There was something calming about the way he moved, the way he seemed completely at ease in his little bakery, as though the rest of the world didn't exist beyond the warm glow of the fire and the smell of fresh bread. As the night wore on, the rain outside showed no signs of stopping. Lucian, sensing Amelia's hesitation to venture back out into the storm, offered her a seat at the small wooden table near the hearth. Without a second thought, he began preparing something in the back. Amelia watched curiously as Lucian moved with quiet efficiency, gathering ingredients from shelves and cupboards. A few minutes later, he returned with a plate of warm, freshly baked pastries and a pot of tea. The pastries were golden brown, dusted with sugar, and filled with sweet fruit preserves. Lucien placed the plate on the table and poured 2 cups of tea, the steam rising in delicate tendrils. Amelia's eyes lit up at the sight of the food. "This looks amazing," she said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. Lucian smiled modestly. "They're simple, but they'll warm you up." The two of them sat by the fire, sharing the pastries and sipping tea. The warmth of the food, combined with the cozy ambience of the bakery, made Amelia feel more at ease than she had in days. There was something special about this moment, something she couldn't quite put into words. As they ate, Lucian shared stories of Bellhurst, tales of the old town and its history, of the generations of bakers who had come before him. His voice was low and soothing, and Amelia found herself leaning forward, eager to hear more. He spoke of the town's festivals, the way the streets came alive with music and laughter during the harvest season, and the quiet beauty of the surrounding countryside. Amelia, in turn, shared her own stories of life in Paris, the bustling streets, the cafes where she would sit for hours, watching the world go by. She spoke of her writing, of the stories she had created and the ones she still hoped to write. Lucian listened with quiet interest, his eyes never leaving hers as she spoke. Time seemed to slip away, the hours passing in a blur of conversation and shared stories. Outside, the rain had turned to a gentle drizzle, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to leave the warmth of the bakery. At some point in the night, Amelia realized that the loneliness she had been carrying with her for so long had begun to fade. There was something about this place, about Lucien's quiet presence, that made her feel more connected to the world around her. It was as though the bakery itself was a sanctuary, a place where time slowed down, and the worries of the outside world melted away. Amelia gazed around the bakery, her eyes settling on the shelves that lined the walls, filled with neatly stacked jars of flour, sugar, and spices. Each jar was carefully labeled in Lucien's neat handwriting, a small testament to the care he took in every aspect of his work. She noticed the worn wooden beams overhead, their dark surface polished smooth by years of use, and the simple wooden table where she now sat, its surface scarred by countless meals and conversations. It was a humble place, unpretentious and timeless, but to Amelia, it felt like the heart of the town itself. She imagined the generations of Bellhurst residents who had passed through this bakery, stopping in for a loaf of bread or a warm pastry, perhaps sharing a quiet word with Lucien or his father before him. It was a place of comfort, of warmth and continuity, and in that moment, Amelia felt deeply grateful to have found it. As the fire burned low, Lucian rose from his seat and began clearing the table. Amelia watched him for a moment before standing and offering to help. Together, they tidied the small bakery, their movements synchronized in the way that only comes from shared understanding. When the last dish was washed and the bakery was quiet once more, Lucian turned to Amelia. "You're welcome to stay the night," he said softly. "There's a small room upstairs. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry." Amelia hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Thank you, Lucian. I don't know what I would have done without you tonight." Lucian smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sometimes we all need a little shelter from the storm." That night, as Amelia lay in the small room above the bakery, wrapped in a warm blanket, she listened to the rain as it finally began to fade. The soft patter on the roof, the gentle creak of the old wooden beams, and the faint scent of freshly baked bread all mingled together, creating a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. In the morning, when the sun rose over Bellhurst, casting a golden light across the cobblestone streets, Amelia awoke to the smell of fresh bread. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where Lucian was already hard at work, kneading dough with the same quiet dedication as the night before. "Good morning," he said with a smile as she entered the bakery. "Good morning," Amelia replied, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. They shared a simple breakfast of warm bread and butter, the bakery filled with the soft light of the early morning sun. As Amelia prepared to leave, Lucian handed her a small loaf of bread wrapped in brown paper. "For the road," he said. Amelia smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Lucian, for everything. Lucian nodded, his gaze steady. Safe travels, Amelia. And remember, the door is always open if you ever find yourself back in Bellhurst. With that, Amelia stepped out into the morning light, the town of Bellhurst waking up around her. The storm had passed, and the world felt new again. As she made her way down the cobblestone streets, the scent of fresh bread lingered in the air, a reminder of the kindness she had found in the most unexpected of places. And as she walked, Amelia couldn't help but smile, knowing that the warmth of Lucian's bakery would stay with her, no matter where the road took her next. Thank you for joining us at Story Planet tonight. We hope the warm ambience of Bellhurst's little bakery brought you comfort and a sense of peace. If you enjoyed this cozy atmosphere and the tale we shared, you may consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. And don't forget to click the bell icon so you're notified whenever we have new journeys waiting for you. Until next time, may your nights be filled with warmth and sweet dreams.